Hot akara, buy your breakfast. Peppers, very fresh peppers here.
Here it is, all of it. Good. Don't be late again.
Look what you have done. All that money. And for what?
I am sorry, Mama. I didn't mean for this to happen.
Welcome to the shop, Mr. Diallo. It is an honor to finally meet you.
The work you are doing here is very impressive, young man.
You see, slow and steady. That is how you build something that lasts.
In the bustling heart of a sun-scorched Lagos, where the morning heat felt like the city itself was breathing fire, a young man named Dami walked barefoot across the dusty lanes of Mushin, his stomach rumbling louder than the hawkers calling for attention, and yet his eyes burned with a hunger that went beyond food. He was not born into wealth, for his mother, Mommy, spent her mornings at the Oshodi market, her hands roughened by years of pounding pepper and shaping akra, while his father's love for palm wine drowned every promise he ever made, leaving Dami to learn resilience before he even understood the word, and every night, on his thin mat under the creaking roof that harbored both rats and dreams, he swore to himself that one day, his hands would cradle fortune like water slipping through the sands of a golden beach, a dream born not out of greed but of survival. And when the shrill voice of Madame Miss Pesto echoed through the compound at 4:30 a.m., grinding pepper for her famous akra, it was Mommy's call, sharp as a blade, that pulled him from sleep to reality, urging him to rise or risk being swallowed by a world that did not forgive laziness. By 5, he was helping set up the small stall, and by 6, running alongside the Mui bus toward Yaba, where he delivered electronics for the stout, round-bellied Alajamusa, who paid him a pittance of 15,000 naira a month, a sum that barely covered dreams, yet Dami's mind was sharper than the jagged edges of broken glass, studying the mansions and sleek cars of Victoria Island, imagining the lives inside, absorbing lessons from their luxury, and vowing silently that he would rise above his circumstances. Every delivery was a window into a world he hungered for. Every glance at Chief Kazim's fountain and gleaming Range Rover a reminder of the difference between aspiration and reality, and though elders whispered proverbs about rats and lizards and the perils of greed, Dami ignored them, focusing only on the math of opportunity and the taste of ambition that lingered on his tongue. Little did he know, the path ahead would test every fiber of his being. For one sweltering Tuesday, while delivering a television to a mansion on Banana Island, he would encounter the intoxicating power of money and the allure of shortcuts, the first brush with a life that promised more than honest toil could provide. And as Chief Kazim handed him 10 crisp 1,000 naira notes like scraps of paper, Dami's heart thumped with a dangerous mix of pride and longing, the vision of wealth now tangible, intoxicating. And yet, the same night, as he walked home under the amber glow of streetlights, he could not shake a quiet, small voice inside that whispered caution, a voice he would struggle to hear in the years to come. For this was the moment the seed of hunger was planted deep in his soul, a hunger that would drive him to heights and depths, teaching him, in time, that ambition untempered by wisdom is a blade that can cut both the hand and the heart. Dami's world seemed to shimmer with possibility after that first taste of Chief Kazim's casual wealth, and yet the streets of Lagos whispered secrets that promised faster, easier riches, for it was on a humid evening in Yaba, with the sun melting into molten orange behind the sagging rooftops, that he met Tibi, a slick young man whose laughter was like jingling coins and whose eyes sparkled with the kind of danger that made Dami's pulse quicken. Tibi, in a crisp white shirt that had probably never touched the grime of Mushin, leaned on the wall of a crowded viewing center where football matches played on flickering screens, and with a grin that seemed both honest and treacherous, invited Dami into a business that could turn his hard-earned savings into a fortune almost overnight, whispering words that dripped like honey but hid the sting of thorns, promising that a small seed of capital could grow into a forest of money in just a few months. And Dami, whose heart raced at the thought of seeing his mother relieved of her daily struggle, his sister Falak sitting in a classroom with books that smelled of ink and possibility, ignored the warnings of elders that echoed like ghosts, proverbs about goats wandering into lions' dens, about money being a good servant but a terrible master, and convinced himself that this was the chance destiny had been whispering about while he sweated and toiled for pennies. For what harm could there be in investing in a clever scheme if it meant changing his family's life forever. With trembling hands, he withdrew every coin he had saved from the past 2 years, 82,000 naira that had been scraped from deliveries and market stalls. And when he slid open his mother's secret whiskey container and felt the 150,000 naira wrapped in faded newspaper, he imagined it as the bridge to a better world, ignoring the fire that bit his conscience, and even the 200,000 naira meant for his sister's school fees, entrusted to him by Uncle Shogun, became part of the pile he handed to Tibi, whose smile should have warned him, the kind of serpent grin that promised ease and delivered ruin. That night, Dammy lay awake on his mat, hearing the soft whispers of rats and the distant calls of street hawkers, and though he told himself that he was making a noble investment, a small, stubborn voice inside him, like a spark trapped in a coal, cried out that he was gambling not just money, but trust, love, and the fragile thread that held his family together. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, the dreams he saw were painted in gold: a new house for mommy, a scholarship for Falak, a life lifted from the dirt and dust of Mushin into the glittering skyline of Victoria Island. Yet beneath the glitter, the shadow of consequence lingered, and unbeknownst to Dammy, the path he had chosen would soon twist into a labyrinth of betrayal, loss, and lessons so sharp they would cut deeper than the hottest Lagos sun. For money, he would learn, never forgives ignorance, and every naira taken without wisdom carries the weight of potential heartbreak. The city outside slept fitfully, its heartbeat steady and unforgiving, as Dammy's dreams clashed with reality, the first tremors of a storm brewing that would test the limits of his courage, patience, and morality, a storm that would either forge him into a man of honor or shatter him into fragments, leaving only the memory of what could have been. And as the night deepened, one thing was certain: Dammy's journey into the perilous world of quick fortune had begun, and nothing, not fear, not love, not loyalty, would ever be the same again. The first weeks after handing over every naira to Tibi were sweeter than Dammy had ever imagined, the kind of sweetness that made the tongue forget caution, as his phone buzzed constantly with screenshots of supposed profits. 432,000 naira swelling into 520,000, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life untethered from struggle, where mommy could rest, Falak could attend the best school, and he could walk the streets of Lagos with his head high. But as the days melted into weeks, the sweetness began to curdle, replaced by an unease that clung to Dammy's chest like the thick Lagos humidity, and when his mother's worried voice called for her savings, a deep pit opened in his stomach. The 150,000 naira that had been hidden in old newspaper now vanished into the promise of Tibi's schemes, while the 200,000 meant for his sister's school fees loomed like a time bomb ticking toward inevitable disaster. Dammy tried to convince himself, and even mommy, that it was only a temporary delay, that the investment needed time to multiply, that patience was the path to fortune. Yet deep inside, fear clawed at him, silent but merciless, and when Uncle Shogun called from Abuja demanding the deadline for Falak's fees, Dammy's throat dried, his voice faltering under the weight of responsibility he had gambled away, as he pleaded with Tibi for a withdrawal, only to be met with calm excuses and then silence, the kind of silence that screams of betrayal. And when week 8 arrived, Falak was sent home, her dreams of school scattering like ashes in the wind, her young eyes hardened with disappointment, and mommy's face, once radiant with song and laughter, was now etched with lines of grief, her hands trembling as she demanded to know where the money had gone. And Dammy, trapped in the collapse of his own choices, could only whisper half-truths, his heart breaking under the weight of shame, realizing that the lessons the elders had murmured for years about greed, patience, and the value of hard work had been ignored, and that every proverb, every cautionary tale, every warning about the perils of chasing quick wealth had manifested in the ruin of his family's trust and his own integrity. And as Tibi vanished into the shadows of Lagos, leaving behind only the echo of promises and the ghost of stolen money, Dammy felt the sting of betrayal not just by a friend, but by his own ambition, his own desire for fast success. And in that moment, under the scorching sun and the judgmental eyes of neighbors who whispered behind their doors, Dammy understood the hardest lesson of all, that wealth built on deceit, no matter how convincing or well-dressed, is a mirage that evaporates under the heat of reality. And the richest man who gambles with trust pays in heartbreak, a debt that cannot be repaid with naira alone. And as he watched his sister's dreams crumble and his mother's spirit dim, he vowed that if he survived this storm, he would rebuild not just his life, but the foundation of his character, brick by brick, learning that money is a servant, never a master, and that the price of ambition without wisdom is measured in tears, lost innocence, and the bitter taste of regret, while Lagos, relentless and indifferent, carried on around him, a city of endless opportunity and peril, where lessons are learned in fire, and survival depends not only on cunning, but on the courage to face one's own failures and rise again. 6 months had passed since the collapse of Tibby's scheme, and Dammy found himself a shadow wandering the unforgiving streets under the Oshodi Bridge, the rhythmic chaos of Lagos life flowing around him like a river that did not pause for grief, cars honking, buses belching smoke, hawkers shouting, children running, all while he clutched 250 naira in his pocket, barely enough for a bottle of water or a small meal, and yet the true weight on his shoulders was invisible, the shame of betrayal, the heartbreak of his sister Falak expelled from school, the grief of mommy whose laughter had vanished from the market, the scorn of Uncle Shogun whose trust had been fractured, and the whispers of neighbors who no longer greeted him with the warmth of familiarity but with the sharp edge of judgment. And on that bridge, in the sticky heat and dust, an old man appeared, leaning on a worn cane, his face carved by decades of life's trials, eyes sharp and knowing, and he spoke with a voice like gravel rolling over stones, asking why the young man had come to linger here among shadows when life had so much more to offer, and Dammy, skeptical at first, muttered that it was none of the old man's concern, that misfortune had chosen him and left him little to hope for, but the old man chuckled softly, a sound that carried a weight of experience and sorrow, recounting how he too had once chased wealth with blind ambition, built a house and amassed goods, only to watch them dissolve in greed and error, and how in losing everything, he discovered that the true treasures in life, family, love, laughter, respect, and conscience, cost nothing yet are more valuable than the heaviest gold, and as Dammy listened, the old man's words sank deep, striking chords of realization that reverberated in his chest, teaching him that the money he had chased was never the solution, but a distraction that had blinded him to the things that truly mattered, and as the old man walked away, leaving Dammy with nothing but the fading light of day and 250 naira, he felt a strange weight lift and a strange clarity settle, the kind that comes only after the storm has stripped everything bare, and for the first time in months, Dammy wept, not out of despair, but out of understanding, mourning his foolishness, the lost innocence of his sister, the pain he had caused his mother, yet also feeling a spark of resolve, a tiny ember of determination to rebuild not by chasing shortcuts, but through honest labor, humility, and patience, and that night, under the bridge where the city lights flickered like distant stars, Dammy swore that he would repay every debt, restore every trust, and learn to measure success not in quick riches but in the depth of character and the warmth of family, a decision forged in the crucible of suffering, a resolution to rise from the ashes of failure, and though Lagos around him carried on indifferent, he now carried within him a fire that no trickery or misfortune could extinguish, a fire that whispered promise, endurance, and the slow, steady climb toward redemption, teaching him the hardest lesson yet, that rock bottom is not the end, but the ground from which true strength and wisdom emerge. The months after his encounter with the old man became a crucible of change for Dammy, and he emerged from the ashes of his mistakes thinner, quieter, and with a humility forged in the fire of regret, rising before dawn to join his mother at the Oshodi market, helping her sell akara and fried yams with a careful patience he had never known, and by mid-morning, he moved to Yaba, washing cars under the blazing sun, his hands blistered and his back aching, while the hum of the city reminded him that life continued whether he succeeded or failed, and in the evenings, he became a night guard at a small electrical shop in Mushin, earning modest wages but learning discipline, and every naira he collected was set aside not for reckless schemes or fleeting pleasures, but to repay the debts he had created, to restore his mother's savings, and to fund Falak's delayed education, and as he stacked bills carefully into envelopes, he felt a slow but growing pride, the kind that comes not from wealth, but from integrity and perseverance, for each day he worked, he reclaimed pieces of his soul that Tibby's deceit had stolen, and each night, under the dim streetlight outside his small room, he reviewed his progress, calculating how many months it would take to replace the 150,000 naira stolen from mommy, and the 200,000 that had cost Falak a year of schooling, and though exhaustion was constant, his resolve never wavered, for he understood that shortcuts had brought him ruin, while steady, honest labor could rebuild both fortune and character, and slowly, the whispers of neighbors softened, seeing not a reckless boy but a man committed to change, and with every coin returned, every debt repaid, and every task completed, Dammy's confidence grew in a quiet, measured way, unassuming but unstoppable, and when the day came he handed mommy the 150,000 naira wrapped once more in old newspaper, her eyes glistening with tears of relief and pride, he realized that the joy of restoring trust was richer than any promise of fast wealth, and as Falak returned to school with Uncle Shogun's support, this time under careful supervision, Dammy learned that the path to success is often winding, littered with obstacles, and requires patience, resilience, and respect for both money and relationships. And as he walked through the busy streets of Lagos, pushing his small wheelbarrow loaded with yams, the sweat on his brow became a badge of honor, a symbol of his choice to rise. Honestly, a declaration to the world that he would no longer be seduced by illusions of quick fortune, and though his small electrical shop in Mushin was humble compared to Banana Island mansions, it became his fortress of integrity, a place where every wire connected, every appliance repaired, and every coin earned was a testament to the man he was becoming, teaching him, and anyone who might watch him, that true redemption is not handed down by luck, chance, or borrowed schemes, but carved slowly with labor, courage, and unwavering commitment to make right what was once broken. And as Lagos pulsed around him, full of temptations and shortcuts, Dammy knew he had found the one wealth that no scheme could steal: self-respect, wisdom, and the trust of those he loved most. 2 years of tireless labor had sculpted Dammy into a man of quiet strength and unwavering focus, his small electrical shop in Mushin now humming with activity as apprentices carefully followed his instructions, Mommy teaching them alongside him with the pride of a mother who had witnessed her son's transformation, and Falak, now back in school, her eyes bright with hope and ambition, reminded him daily why he had endured the long nights, blistered hands, and endless sweat, while the streets of Lagos, ever buzzing, carried whispers of his reputation as a young man who worked honestly and delivered quality. And it was on a sweltering Saturday afternoon, with the sun glinting off the corrugated roofs, that a sleek car rolled to a stop in front of his humble shop, and out stepped Chief Kazim himself, the same man whose mansion had once dazzled Dammy with its fountains, luxury cars, and careless display of wealth. And now, instead of awe or fear, Dammy felt a calm confidence, grounded in the knowledge that his value was built, not inherited or borrowed. And as Chief Kazim approached, his booming voice greeting Dammy, he revealed a surprising respect for the young man who had once been a delivery boy in his compound, explaining that he had heard of Dammy's honesty, skill, and dedication, and had a contract worth 15 million naira for electrical work in a new hotel. And Dammy, though astonished, responded with the same steady humility that had defined his years of labor, asking simply, "Sir, when do you need me to start?" And in that moment, the city seemed to pause, the air heavy with validation, for here was tangible proof that diligence, integrity, and patience could transform lives more powerfully than any scheme or shortcut. And as Chief Kazim departed, promising contracts and payment, Mommy stepped from the back of the shop, her eyes glistening with tears of pride and relief, and Dammy realized that the lessons of hardship had become his foundation, that the mistakes of youth had taught him the unshakable value of honesty and perseverance, and that wealth, when earned rightly, carried not just coins and bills, but the trust, respect, and love of those around him. And as he returned to his apprentices, guiding hands over wires and circuits, he felt a deep satisfaction that surpassed any fleeting thrill of fast money, knowing that he had reclaimed his family's dignity, restored his sister's dreams, and secured his mother's peace. And Lagos, with all its chaos and temptation, now seemed less like a battlefield and more like a proving ground where character, not cunning, determined who truly rose. And in that bustling market, surrounded by the hum of commerce, the laughter of Mommy, the chatter of apprentices, and the distant honking of buses, Dammy finally understood the profound truth that the most valuable successes in life are earned slowly, with patience, labor, and an unwavering commitment to do right by those you love. And that in rebuilding himself from the ruins of ambition and betrayal, he had found not just money or opportunity, but the quiet, unshakable power of integrity and resilience, the kind that no trickery, shortcut, or fortune could ever take away. By the time Dammy looked back on the streets of Mushin from the threshold of his small, bustling electrical shop, he understood that wealth measured only in naira could vanish in a moment, but the true riches of life, the trust of family, the lessons learned through hardship, the quiet pride of honest labor, and the integrity that could never be stolen, were impervious to trickery. And as he watched Falak, now a bright young nursing student at the University of Lagos, pass by with a smile full of hope, he remembered the nights under the Oshodi Bridge when he had wept for his foolishness, the hours of toil washing cars, pushing a wheelbarrow full of yams, and repairing appliances while the city around him roared with chaos and opportunity. And in every bead of sweat, every blistered hand, he had discovered a truth more valuable than all the schemes Tibby could conjure: patience, humility, and diligence were the bridges to lasting success. And as Mommy guided his apprentices, her sharp Voice softened by pride, Dammy realized that his journey had not only rebuilt his family's future but had created a foundation for generations to come, for the young men and women under his tutelage were learning that character is forged through labor, mistakes are powerful teachers, and no shortcut could ever replace the dignity earned through effort. And when Chief Kazem returned one afternoon to inspect work, offering another substantial contract, Dammy greeted him with the same humility and focus that had earned his trust years before, recognizing that true recognition comes not from dazzling clients with charm, but by consistently delivering quality and honoring one's word. And as he stood in his shop, tools in hand, surrounded by the hum of learning and commerce, he reflected on the lessons that had cost him nearly everything, that quick money is a treacherous master, that the most expensive lessons often come disguised as opportunity, and that the treasures that truly matter, family love, the respect of others, personal integrity, and the wisdom to know what cannot be bought, are freely given, yet priceless. And Dammy knew that even if Lagos continued to tempt the greedy, and the city never stopped offering schemes promising overnight fortune, he would never again trade the priceless wealth of character for a mirage of fast cash. And as the sun dipped low behind the skyline, casting long shadows across his shop, he felt a deep, unshakable peace, a sense of accomplishment not measured in millions alone, but in the redemption of a life once squandered, now rebuilt with care. And in that moment, surrounded by his mother's proud gaze, his sister's hopeful smile, and the diligent hands of his apprentices, Dammy finally understood the ultimate truth of the human journey. Money is only a servant, never a god. Quick schemes bring quick destruction, and the most enduring fortune is found not in coins, but in honesty, perseverance, and the love and trust of those whose hearts we hold dear. For a life built on character will weather any storm, rise after any fall, and leave a legacy far richer than anything money alone could ever provide.